In Hollywood, there are many ways to destroy a career. You can make a bad movie, say the wrong thing, even survive scandal. But what if one man could end everything without raising his voice? For 30 years, The Tonight Show was not just television. It was a throne. When Johnny Carson smiled, careers were born. When he went silent, they ended. He didn't argue. He erased. Tonight, we open a file never meant to be opened. 11 guests who learned that silence was the final sentence. Joan Rivers. Of all the names on Johnny Carson's blacklist, none cut deeper than Joan Rivers. This was not a guest. This was family. Johnny Carson discovered Joan Rivers when she was unknown, insecure, and struggling to survive in comedy. After her first appearance, he famously declared on air, "You're going to be a star." That sentence changed her life. Johnny didn't just invite her back. He mentored her. He protected her. He elevated her. More than that, he trusted her. Joan Rivers became the permanent guest host of The Tonight Show. When Johnny Carson went on vacation, she alone was allowed to sit behind that desk. In Hollywood terms, that chair meant succession. Everyone believed Joan Rivers was being groomed as his heir, but loyalty was Johnny Carson's highest value, and betrayal was the one sin he never forgave. In 1986, fearing NBC might eventually replace her, Joan Rivers secretly negotiated a deal with Fox to launch a competing late-night show, without telling Johnny. He found out the way strangers do, through the press. To Johnny Carson, this wasn't ambition. It was deception. When Joan called him to explain, hoping decades of affection would soften the blow, Johnny answered calmly. No shouting, no emotion. Just one cold sentence. "I hear you got your own show. Congratulations." Then he hung up. That was it. Johnny Carson ordered Joan Rivers banned from The Tonight Show for life. Her name was never spoken again. Her clips were locked away, even after her show failed, even after her husband's tragic death, even after public opinion softened. Johnny never relented. For 19 years, he maintained total silence. Joan Rivers learned the hardest rule of Johnny Carson's world. You can leave, but if you leave without permission, you will never exist again. Wayne Newton. Wayne Newton was known as Mr. Las Vegas, polished, flashy, confident, a man who thrived on applause. Johnny Carson turned him into a punchline. Throughout the early 1980s, Carson mocked Newton relentlessly in his monologues, often targeting his masculinity and public image. The audience laughed. Wayne Newton did not. After enduring joke after joke, Newton snapped. Instead of calling lawyers or managers, he drove straight to NBC's Burbank studio. He bypassed security, walked into Johnny Carson's private dressing room, the one place no guest was supposed to enter uninvited. And then, he crossed the line no one had crossed before. Wayne Newton grabbed Johnny Carson by the lapels and threatened him. Not metaphorically, not humorously, physically. According to Newton's own account, he warned Johnny that if the jokes continued, he wouldn't sue. He would retaliate in public, violently. Johnny Carson hated confrontation, but he also understood danger. He nodded. The jokes stopped, but forgiveness never came. From that moment forward, Wayne Newton was erased from The Tonight Show. His name was never mentioned. He was never invited back. Johnny didn't fight him. He deleted him. In Johnny Carson's world, you could insult him. You could annoy him. But threatening him inside his own sanctuary was unforgivable. Wayne Newton won the argument. Johnny Carson won the war. Chevy Chase. At his peak, Chevy Chase looked untouchable. He was young, handsome, and riding the explosive success of Saturday Night Live. America laughed at him. Studios chased him. Executives called him the future of comedy. Even Johnny Carson, a man notoriously skeptical of trends, initially saw something promising in Chevy Chase. For a brief moment, Johnny believed this arrogant newcomer might represent the next generation. That belief did not last. Behind the scenes at The Tonight Show, Chevy Chase behaved like a prince who believed the palace existed for his convenience. Crew members complained quietly at first. He snapped at assistants, mocked technicians, treated makeup artists as disposable. To Johnny Carson, this behavior was not trivial. He considered his staff family. They were not servants. They were the foundation of the show. Then came the on-air disrespect. Chevy Chase sat in Johnny's presence with his legs spread, leaning back, interrupting answers, deliberately disrupting the rhythm of the interview. He spoke over Johnny. He corrected him. He treated the host not as the king of late night, but as a peer who needed to be challenged. Johnny Carson had welcomed legends who never once forgot where they were. Bob Hope, Frank Sinatra, Lucille Ball, all showed deference. Chevy Chase showed none. Worse, his humor carried cruelty. He mocked people's appearances, their failures, their insecurities. Johnny Carson believed comedy should never require humiliation to function. Laughter built on cruelty, in his mind, revealed a rotten core. Johnny did not argue. He did not warn. He did not confront. Instead, he leaned toward producer Fred de Cordova and spoke a sentence so quiet it never reached the audience. "I don't want to see this guy anymore." There was no announcement, no blacklist memo, no explanation. Chevy Chase simply stopped receiving invitations. While other comedians returned again and again, Chevy vanished from Johnny Carson's universe. Hollywood noticed. In Johnny Carson's kingdom, talent could open the door, but character decided whether it stayed open. Chevy Chase learned that lesson too late. Jim Garrison, Johnny Carson rarely used The Tonight Show for politics. When he did, it was because he believed the moment demanded seriousness. In January of 1968, America was still raw from the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Confusion, grief, and suspicion lingered. Into that vacuum stepped Jim Garrison, the New Orleans district attorney who claimed he possessed shocking evidence of a vast conspiracy behind the murder. Johnny Carson invited him on the show, believing he was offering clarity to a wounded nation. What he got instead was manipulation. From the moment Garrison began speaking, something felt wrong. When Johnny asked direct questions, specific questions, Garrison deflected. He produced blurry photographs, vague theories, sweeping accusations unsupported by verifiable proof. He spoke loudly, confidently, and endlessly, but never answered the question asked. Johnny Carson realized, in real time, that he had been used. Garrison wasn't there to seek truth. He was there to promote himself, to sell books, to weaponize fear, to turn America's most trusted late-night platform into a megaphone for speculation disguised as justice. That was unforgivable. On live television, Johnny shifted roles. He stopped being a friendly host and became a prosecutor. He interrupted. He challenged contradictions. He exposed logical holes. Garrison began to sweat. His confidence cracked. The audience could feel it. The moment the spell broke. After the cameras shut off, Johnny Carson was furious. To him, exploiting the death of a president was not entertainment. It was moral corruption. And worse, it insulted the intelligence of his audience. Johnny believed viewers trusted him to filter truth from noise. That night, he felt that trust had been violated. The decision was immediate. Johnny turned to his producers and issued a permanent command. Never let that man back on this show. Jim Garrison was banned for life. No second chances. No redemption arc. No reconsideration. Uri Geller. Before Johnny Carson became the most powerful man in late-night television, he was something else entirely. A magician. Not an illusionist chasing applause, but a craftsman who respected discipline, practice, and honesty. Johnny loved magic, but he despised fraud. And nothing angered him more than performers who disguised tricks as supernatural gifts. Me selling wonder while insulting intelligence. That is why Uri Geller never stood a chance. In the early 1970s, Geller was a global sensation. He claimed to bend spoons with his mind, read thoughts, and manipulate reality through psychic energy. Audiences were hypnotized. Talk shows fawned over him. Hosts protected him. No one challenged him. Johnny Carson did. When Uri Geller accepted an invitation to The Tonight Show in 1973, he assumed it would be another easy performance. He didn't know that Johnny had prepared something far more dangerous than skepticism: control. Before the show, Johnny quietly ensured that every prop on stage was supplied by NBC. Brand new spoons, fresh envelopes, objects Geller had never touched. This was not cruelty. It was honesty. When the cameras rolled, Johnny leaned back calmly and invited Geller to perform. And nothing happened. The spoons didn't bend. The drawings weren't guessed. The miracles vanished. Geller grew nervous. He blamed pressure, fatigue, bad energy. Johnny said nothing. He didn't rescue him with jokes. He didn't change the subject. He let silence do the work. For over 20 agonizing minutes, millions of viewers watched a man unravel on live television. Johnny Carson didn't accuse Geller of fraud. He didn't need to. The truth revealed itself. After that night, Uri Geller was never invited back. In Johnny Carson's world, deceiving the audience was not a mistake. It was a crime. And once exposed, there was no forgiveness, only erasure. Milton Berle. Milton Berle was once known as Mr. Television. In the 1950s, he ruled the medium Johnny Carson would later dominate. Millions bought television sets just to watch him perform. By the time Burle appeared on The Tonight Show, he was no longer king, but he never accepted that truth. That refusal sealed his fate. When Milton Berle walked onto Johnny Carson's stage, he did not behave like a guest. He behaved like an owner returning to what he believed was still his house. He interrupted constantly. He talked over Johnny. He pulled focus whenever another guest spoke. Every second had to belong to him. Johnny Carson valued order, rhythm, control. Burle shattered all three. He smoked cigars despite Johnny's visible discomfort, blew smoke across the desk, ignored cues. Worse, he violated Johnny's personal boundaries, touching his arm, slapping his thigh, poking him during jokes. To Johnny, physical familiarity was deeply invasive. His smiles tightened, yet his eyes hardened. The true breaking point came when Burle attempted to teach Johnny Carson how to do comedy on his own show. That was unforgivable. Johnny never exploded. He never humiliated Burle publicly. Out of respect for Burle's legacy, there was no formal ban. Instead, Johnny chose a punishment far more devastating. He stopped inviting him. Gradually, quietly, Milton Berle disappeared from The Tonight Show. No explanation, no announcement, just absence. In Johnny Carson's kingdom, legends were welcome, but only if they recognized whose throne they stood before. Milton Berle never did, and so the former king was gently, mercilessly erased. Raymond Burr. Raymond Burr was not a scandal. He was not a traitor. He was not a bully. He was something far worse for a live television host. He was dull. On screen, while Raymond Burr was a monument. As Perry Mason, he dominated courtrooms with precision and authority. As Ironside, he projected intelligence and moral weight. Audiences believed he would bring gravitas and fascinating insight to The Tonight Show. Johnny Carson believed that too. The moment Burr sat in the guest chair, the illusion collapsed. Johnny opened with warmth, humor, and gentle prompts. Stories from the set, behind-the-scenes moments, anything that might loosen the atmosphere. Burr responded with answers so short they barely qualified as conversation. Yes. No, I suppose. Each reply landed like a stone in water that refused to ripple. Dead air followed. Johnny tried again. Questions about acting, about life, about hobbies. Burr answered honestly, but without curiosity or charm. He spoke as if interrogation itself were an inconvenience. His voice was flat, his expression unmoved. For a talk show host, silence is not neutral. It is lethal. Johnny began working overtime, tapping his pencil, glancing at Ed McMahon, joking about his own failure to extract laughter. The audience shifted uncomfortably. The tension became palpable. Viewers could feel the host straining to keep the show alive. Raymond Burr did nothing wrong. And that was the problem. In Johnny Carson's world, entertainment required participation. You didn't need to be funny, but you needed to play. Burr refused, or simply could not. After the segment ended, Johnny collapsed theatrically onto his desk, joking that he'd rather undergo dental surgery without anesthesia than repeat the experience. The joke carried truth. Raymond Burr was never formally banned, but he was never invited back, and his name quietly vanished from the booking board. In the kingdom of late-night television, boredom was an unforgivable offense, and silence was the sentence. Ryan O'Neal. By the early 1970s, Ryan O'Neal was Hollywood royalty. Handsome, bankable, idolized. His films made millions, and his face sold fantasies. When he walked onto the Tonight Show stage, the studio audience erupted. They expected charm, warmth, effort. Johnny Carson expected respect. What he received was indifference. Ryan O'Neal slouched into the guest chair like a man doing a favor. His posture was careless. His attention wandered. When Johnny asked questions, O'Neal responded with shrugs and half-sentences. When jokes were offered, he barely reacted. It wasn't shyness. It was contempt. Ryan treated the interview as an obligation beneath him, a cheap stop on a publicity tour. He stared at monitors instead of listening, adjusted his hair, checked his reflection. He behaved like a star, trapped in a room with people he considered irrelevant. Johnny Carson took this personally. To Johnny, The Tonight Show was not filler. It was craft, preparation, respect for the audience. Anyone who sat in that chair was expected to meet the moment with sincerity. Ryan O'Neal didn't. The interview dragged. Johnny tried humor. He tried conversation. He tried warmth. Nothing landed. O'Neal remained detached, radiating the unspoken message that television appearances were beneath him. After the taping, Johnny didn't rant. He simply asked a question that ended everything. Who does this guy think he is? Then came the order. If he doesn't want to be here, don't invite him back. Ryan O'Neal was never formally banned. He didn't need to be. The invitation stopped. His absence spoke louder than any announcement. In Johnny Carson's world, arrogance was louder than scandal, and no amount of beauty or box office power could compensate for disrespect in that chair. Bob Hope. Bob Hope was never officially banned from The Tonight Show. And that, to Johnny Carson, was the cruelest irony of all. To the public, Bob Hope appeared to be Johnny's closest ally, a cheerful elder statesman of comedy who dropped by frequently, trading jokes and smiles. But behind the scenes, the truth was far less warm. Bob Hope was not a guest Johnny Carson welcomed. He was a guest Johnny Carson endured. Hope didn't converse. He performed. Every appearance followed the same rigid pattern. Johnny would ask a question about health, family, current events, and Bob Hope would ignore it completely, launching instead into a pre-written joke prepared by his team of writers. He didn't listen. He didn't adapt. He waited for silence and fired the next punchline like a machine. Johnny Carson was a master of improvisation. He valued timing, reaction, and genuine exchange. Sitting across from Bob Hope felt less like an interview and more like hosting a talking billboard. Johnny wasn't a partner. He was a prop. The audience laughed. Johnny smiled. But those smiles were the fakest of his career. After each appearance, Johnny would retreat backstage exhausted, loosening his tie and venting quietly to producers. "Him again?" he'd mutter. "He has nothing new. He's not human. He's a routine." But Bob Hope was untouchable. He was too powerful, too profitable, too deeply embedded in NBC's ecosystem. Hope didn't wait for invitations. He announced appearances. He called executives directly. Johnny had no authority to say no. And so Bob Hope became the only man Johnny Carson truly resented, but could not erase. That contradiction haunted him. Bob Hope represents the one flaw in Johnny Carson's kingdom. Proof that even kings must sometimes bow to money and legacy. Hope wasn't banned, but he never entered Johnny's inner circle. He sat in the chair often, but he never earned Johnny's respect. Don Rickles. Don Rickles built his career on insult. No one was safe. Celebrities, politicians, friends, strangers. His humor thrived on aggression, but it worked because it followed an unspoken rule. The audience always knew it was an act. Johnny Carson understood this. For years, Rickles walked a tightrope on The Tonight Show, pushing boundaries while maintaining respect. He insulted Johnny, but never the institution, never the staff, never the sanctity of the chair. Until one night, he went too far. Accounts differ on the exact remark, but the result was unmistakable. Johnny Carson's smile vanished. The laughter turned brittle. The rhythm broke. Something personal had been crossed, not publicly acknowledged, but deeply felt. Johnny Carson froze him out. There was no announcement, no dramatic confrontation. Rickles' name simply stopped appearing on booking schedules. The silence was immediate and unmistakable. In Johnny's world, this was not punishment. It was judgment. Don Rickles understood the rules. Unlike others, he didn't blame Johnny. He didn't complain to executives. He didn't wait it out. He apologized, privately, sincerely, and repeatedly. He acknowledged the line and admitted he crossed it. Johnny Carson believed in discipline, but he also believed in accountability. After time passed, Rickles was allowed back. Carefully, conditionally. The relationship was never quite the same, but the door reopened. Don Rickles stands as a rare exception in Johnny Carson's blacklist. Proof that forgiveness existed, but only for those who recognized the throne and bowed before it. Ed Ames. Ed Ames did not betray Johnny Carson. He did not insult him. He did not disrespect the staff. He made one mistake. And in Johnny Carson's world, one mistake could be enough. Ed Ames was not a troublemaker. He was a respected performer, disciplined, professional, and widely liked within the industry. He carried himself with restraint. When he appeared on The Tonight Show, there was no tension in the air. The atmosphere was relaxed, familiar, trusting. Johnny Carson welcomed him not as a risk, but as a safe guest, someone who understood how the machinery of live television worked. Then came the bit. It was meant to be harmless. A lighthearted comedy segment involving a tomahawk throwing demonstration. A novelty moment designed to provoke laughter, not anxiety. Johnny, confident in his control of the stage, played along. But when Ames released the tomahawk, everything changed. The blade struck far too close to Johnny Carson's head. The studio gasped. The laughter collapsed instantly. For a brief, terrifying second, the illusion that Johnny Carson controlled every inch of his kingdom shattered on live television. Johnny Carson was shaken. It wasn't simply about danger. No, it was about exposure. Johnny prided himself on absolute command of the moment. Timing, tone, pacing, authority. He believed that nothing on his stage should ever feel uncontrolled. That near miss did something worse than frighten him. It embarrassed him. Millions of viewers had just seen the king flinch. On camera, Johnny laughed it off. He smiled. He played the professional. The audience was reassured. The show moved on. But inside, something hardened. Johnny Carson never invited Ed Ames back. There was no explanation. No confrontation. No public fallout. The phone simply stopped ringing. Invitations quietly disappeared. Ames himself reportedly never understood why. To him, it was an accident, a moment gone wrong. To Johnny Carson, it was a breach of trust. In a kingdom built on precision, even accidents carried consequences. And Ed Ames was not punished for malice. He was erased for disrupting the illusion. And that was the quiet cruelty of Johnny Carson's rule. You didn't need bad intentions to lose everything. You only needed to break the spell once. Johnny Carson never raised his voice. He never slammed doors. He never needed to. His power lived in silence. These 11 guests didn't lose their place because they weren't famous enough or funny enough. They lost it because they violated an invisible code, one built on respect, loyalty, and understanding the weight of that chair. In Hollywood, many kings come and go. Johnny Carson ruled without mercy. If you enjoyed opening this file, make sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Which band shocked you the most? Because somewhere in television history, there are still names Johnny Carson never spoke again, and silence is forever.